In 2024, the FDA elevated contaminated vegetables at major grocery chains to Class 1, its most dangerous recall classification, meaning the products could cause serious injury or death. Listeria was found in fresh produce at stores where millions of Americans buy cabbage every week. But grab the wrong head from the wrong store, and what you're really bringing home is spoilage bacteria, elevated nitrite levels, and pathogen-covered leaves sitting in bins no one has monitored for hours, dressed up as one of the safest vegetables you can buy. If this has been your go-to store for 10, 20, 30 years, everything we found has been on your plate that entire time. Today, we're exposing 11 grocery stores selling cabbage you should never buy, including 2 most people consider reliable, plus the 3 stores that actually get it right. Coming in at number 11, Walmart, the most popular grocery store in America. Over 63% of adults consider it for their next shopping trip. Cabbage from Walmart feels like the easiest, cheapest, most obvious choice you could make. Then you look at the recall history. In 2024, Walmart's own MarketSide brand produce was linked to a listeria contamination discovered in MarketSide broccoli florets from supplier Braga Fresh. Listeria doesn't stay in one bin. It migrates across produce sections through shared surfaces, shared water misters, shared handling by the same workers who rotate everything on those shelves. That contamination was discovered in broccoli. But cabbage sits in the same display area, touched by the same hands, rotated by the same staff who missed the broccoli problem entirely. Walk through any Walmart produce section and really look at the cabbage. Yellowing outer leaves peeling away from the head. Wilted edges curling back from heads that have obviously been sitting too long under fluorescent lights. That sour, sulfurous smell when you peel back the first layer isn't freshness fading. That's bacterial decomposition already well underway inside the vegetable. Consumer complaints about Walmart produce quality are constant, documented, and routinely ignored by corporate. Wilted greens, slimy textures, vegetables that look like they arrived a week ago. For anyone managing an autoimmune condition or families with young children at home, listeria exposure from cross-contaminated produce. Bins can lead to sepsis, meningitis, or fatal bloodstream infections. The biggest store in America. The biggest gamble in the produce aisle. Walmart's sheer size doesn't mean safety. It means more volume moving through the system, less individual attention paid to any single head of cabbage, and produce that sits on the shelf until someone either buys it or an employee finally throws it away. At number 10, Kroger. 35 states, dozens of store banners, a reputation as the dependable one-stop shop where you can fill your prescriptions and your grocery cart in one trip. Kroger feels safe because it feels familiar. Then the FDA stepped in. In 2024, the agency elevated vegetable products sold at Kroger stores in Indiana to Class 1, the highest danger classification, after supreme produce items were found contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes. Class 1 means this product can cause serious health consequences or death. That's not a technicality. That's the federal government saying this could kill someone. And Kroger wasn't done. In 2026, Kroger brand frozen products were swept into the massive Ajinomoto glass contamination recall, covering nearly 37 million pounds of food, glass and frozen food, listeria and fresh vegetables. 2 contamination events spanning 2 years from the same grocery chain that millions trust every single day. Pick up a head of cabbage at Kroger and squeeze it firmly. Does it feel dense, heavy for its size, the leaves tight against the core? Or does it give slightly, the leaves compressing like they've lost their water content days ago? That softness isn't ripeness, it's cellular breakdown. For anyone on daily medication for diabetes or kidney disease, or families feeding young kids from that same produce bin, compromised gut linings mean even low-level bacterial contamination from poorly rotated cabbage can trigger severe gastrointestinal episodes that end in the emergency room. 2 contamination events, 2 years. The familiar name protected no one. If you've been shopping at Kroger for decades thinking that familiarity somehow equals food safety, those decades didn't protect you either. If the 2 biggest grocery chains in America can't keep their produce clean, surely the budget stores are at least honest about what they're selling. They're not. Number 9, Aldi. No frills, small stores, everyday low prices. Aldi has earned a fiercely loyal following among budget-conscious shoppers who swear by its value. But that value comes from a staffing model so lean that produce bins go completely unmonitored for hours at a time. Nobody is checking those cabbage heads. Nobody is pulling the ones that have gone soft. Nobody is monitoring the temperature in those open display cases when the afternoon sun hits the storefront windows and the interior quietly warms up. In 2025, Aldi's own Bremer brand meatballs were recalled nationwide for metal contamination from supplier Rosina Food Products. Metal in meatballs. That's not a produce problem directly, but it reveals something critical about how Aldi manages its entire supply chain. The same vendor oversight system that let metal fragments slip into meatballs is responsible for the quality of every head of cabbage sitting on their shelves right now. For anyone on blood thinners like warfarin who needs consistent vitamin K intake, or families trying to eat more vegetables on a tight budget, cabbage from Aldi's minimal staff model becomes a dangerous gamble you take every shopping trip. Vitamin K levels must stay predictable for safe anticoagulant management. Hidden spoilage from inconsistent storage makes that prediction impossible. Low prices, low staffing, low confidence in what you're bringing home. The bargain feels good at checkout. The consequences show up later at home when nobody can explain why dinner made everyone in the family sick. Think the problem is limited to big chains and budget stores? Number 8 is a store that markets itself as a grocery lifeline. Dollar General. Thousands of rural locations across America. The DG Fresh Produce program was pushed aggressively into communities where there is nowhere else to shop for fresh food. For people living in food deserts, Dollar General isn't a choice. It's the only option. That makes everything I'm about to tell you worse. Independent investigations have found DG Fresh Produce often arrives at stores with shorter remaining shelf life than what competitors receive from the same suppliers. The cabbage in that bin may have already used up most of its freshness window before it ever touched the display shelf, and the cold chain infrastructure in those smaller format stores is severely limited. Temperature-controlled storage for leafy and cruciferous vegetables isn't reliable in a building that was originally designed to sell cleaning supplies and canned goods, not perishable food. Feel that cabbage carefully. If the outer leaves are limp and the core feels warm to the touch, the cold chain broke somewhere between the delivery truck and the shelf. For adults managing digestive conditions like diverticulitis, or anyone relying on Dollar General as their only source of fresh produce, chronic low-grade exposure to spoilage bacteria like Clostridium and Bacillus cereus doesn't announce itself with one dramatic illness. It accumulates silently. It worsens existing conditions over months. The only store in town. The worst produce in the county. For communities that deserve better, Dollar General is profiting from the fact that there's nowhere else to go, and the cabbage on those shelves reflects exactly how much they care. You just saw what the budget stores and dollar chains are hiding. So surely a regional grocery chain with decades of loyal customers does better? Not even close. Number 7. Food Lion. A staple across the Southeast for decades. The MVP loyalty card. Competitive pricing on everything from bread to beef. Generations of families trusting this name with their weekly grocery runs without a second thought. Then you look at the actual history. Food Lion's produce handling violations go back to the infamous 1992 Primetime Live Expose, one of the most devastating investigative reports in American grocery history. More than 30 years ago, cameras caught practices that shocked the nation. Yet more recent state health department inspections have cited individual Food Lion locations for improper cold storage temperatures in their produce sections. 30 years and the same category of violation still persists at this chain. Pick up a head of cabbage at Food Lion and smell it before you put it in your cart. Fresh cabbage smells clean, slightly peppery, almost sweet. Cabbage that has begun bacterial decomposition smells sharp, sulfurous, like something turned sour deep inside the leaves. That odor is biogenic amines forming. Histamine and tyramine building up in leaves that look perfectly fine on the outside but have already started rotting where you can't see. For anyone managing blood pressure with daily medication, or families cooking cabbage as a regular weeknight side dish, elevated tyramine from decomposing produce can spike blood pressure dangerously and interfere with MAO inhibitor medications. Decades of loyalty repaid, with decades of the same violations repeating at store after store. Trust isn't earned by how long a name has been on the building. It's earned by what happens inside when the health inspector isn't there. Drop a comment if you've ever opened a head of cabbage that smelled wrong before you even cut into it. Let's see how many of us have been ignoring the warning signs. See the pattern forming? Big chains miss contamination. Budget stores cut corners on cold storage. Regional chains repeat the same violations for decades. So where does that leave the deep discount grocers? Let's find out. Number 6. Save-A-Lot. Prices up to 40% lower than traditional supermarkets. For anyone on a fixed income, that savings feels like a real victory every time you check out. But Save-A-Lot sources much of its produce through limited assortment wholesale networks with fewer supplier audits than the major chains run. Fewer audits means less oversight of what's actually arriving at your local store. Less oversight means the cabbage sitting in that display could have come from anywhere, stored however the distributor saw fit, shipped whenever the schedule allowed. Multiple locations have received state-level citations for storing produce at improper temperatures or displaying items well past their prime. Cut into a head of cabbage from Save-A-Lot and examine the core closely. If the inner leaves look brownish at the edges or feel slimy near the center, that's not just age. That's the early stage of pathogen colonization taking hold inside the vegetable you're about to feed your family. For anyone with reduced stomach acid, a condition that develops naturally with aging, or families stretching grocery budgets with bulk cabbage purchases every week, the acid barrier your body depends on to kill foodborne pathogens is already weaker than it should be. Eating bargain-priced cabbage that has been improperly stored significantly increases the risk of salmonella and E. coli infection. 40% savings, 100% of the risk. The discount is not worth the hospital bill that follows it. If this is helping you make safer choices at the store, hit subscribe. It's free, and it means you'll never miss these investigations. This next one might surprise you. Number 5. Walmart Neighborhood Market. The smaller, more convenient version of Walmart designed specifically for quick trips. Many shoppers actually prefer the manageable store size. Easier to navigate, quicker in and out, far less overwhelming than a full supercenter. But smaller stores receive less frequent produce deliveries than their massive parent locations across town. Cabbage and other cruciferous vegetables sit longer on the shelves before anyone purchases them. The compressed backroom space in these smaller locations severely limits proper cold storage rotation practices. What you gain in convenience, you lose in freshness every single visit. The cabbage in a Walmart neighborhood market may have been delivered days after the same shipment already hit the supercenter down the road. Hold 2 heads of cabbage side by side and compare them honestly. The fresh one feels dense and heavy, the leaves tight against the core like they're holding on for dear life. The old one feels lighter, slightly hollow, the outer leaves pulling away from the head as if trying to escape. That separation is moisture loss at the cellular level. And as moisture exits the tissue, potassium concentration in the remaining cells increases substantially. For anyone with chronic kidney disease who needs to monitor potassium carefully, or families cooking regularly for elderly relatives with heart conditions, prolonged shelf storage pushes potassium levels in aging cabbage into territory that can trigger cardiac arrhythmia. A heart rhythm problem from a vegetable. Not because cabbage is dangerous, but because this store kept it far too long on a shelf. Nobody checked. Convenient shopping? Inconvenient consequences hiding in every wilted leaf on that neglected shelf. A lot of people switched to bulk buy stores thinking they were getting better value and fresher stock because of the higher volume moving through the building. They weren't. Number 4. WinCo Foods. Employee-owned. Rock-bottom bulk pricing. High marks in consumer satisfaction surveys year after year. WinCo feels like the smart shopper's insider secret, the place only truly savvy buyers know about. But those open bin bulk produce displays tell a very different story when you look closely at what's actually happening on the floor. Every single head of cabbage in that bin has been touched, squeezed, turned over, picked up and put back by other customers well before you arrive. Ambient air temperature fluctuates every time the front doors swing open. Cross-contamination from adjacent unwashed produce items in neighboring bins is constant and completely unavoidable in this format. Pathogens like Staphylococcus aureus can survive on produce surfaces for hours after a single brief touch. That cabbage head 3 or 4 people handled before you picked it up carries whatever was on their hands, their shopping cart handles, their phone screens. For anyone with a compromised immune system from diabetes or autoimmune disorders, or families with young kids who grab produce with unwashed hands in every store, multi-touch surfaces in open bulk bins are active transmission vectors for bacterial infection that absolutely nobody is monitoring or sanitizing. You're not just buying cabbage at WinCo, you're buying every hand that touched it before yours did. Employee-owned. Customer contaminated. The savings aren't worth the invisible exposure that nobody tracks, nobody tests for, and nobody takes responsibility for when you get sick after cooking what looked like a perfectly good head of cabbage. The next store on this list has been trusted for over 100 years, and that century of trust is exactly the problem. Number 3. Piggly Wiggly, America's first self-service supermarket. A name that carries nostalgia, heritage, and deep Southern tradition passed down through families. Grandparents shopped here, parents shopped here. That generational loyalty feels like it should guarantee something about the quality of what's on those shelves. It doesn't. Many Piggly Wiggly locations are independently owned franchises with wildly inconsistent quality control standards from one store to the very next. What you get at one well-managed location bears no resemblance to what you get at another struggling franchise across town. Smaller franchise operators often lack the purchasing power to source premium-grade produce from reliable growers. They can't afford state-of-the-art cold storage equipment that keeps cabbage crisp and safe for customers. The cabbage at a well-run Piggly Wiggly might be perfectly fine. The cabbage at a struggling franchise might be a full week past its prime with nobody noticing or caring enough to pull it. You have absolutely no way of knowing which store you're walking into until you're already standing in the produce aisle. Peel back the outer leaves and examine the stem end closely. Fresh cabbage has a clean, white, moist cut that looks alive. Old cabbage shows browning, drying, sometimes a gray film that signals mold colonization beginning beneath the visible surface. For anyone managing type 2 diabetes, who depends on cabbage's fiber and chromium content to help regulate blood sugar, or health-conscious shoppers choosing cabbage specifically for its documented nutritional benefits. Produce that has lost its nutrient density through improper storage means you're eating the carbohydrates without any of the benefits that made you choose it. 100 years of history. Zero consistency in what you're actually getting. The number 2 spot goes to a store that trades quality for price and calls it a business model. Number 2. Food for less. Kroger's warehouse-style discount banner. Bag your own groceries. No frills, no assistance, lower prices. The trade-off they don't advertise is what happens to the produce sitting on that warehouse floor all day long. The format means cabbage is often displayed on pallets or in bulk bins, with minimal climate control on the wide-open sales floor. Walk through a food for less produce section and feel the air temperature around you carefully. It's the same ambient warmth as the rest of the store. No dedicated cooling zones, no misting systems, no controlled environment protecting those vegetables from slow, steady decay. The reduced labor model means damaged or aging cabbage heads sit in bins unchecked for hours on end. Nobody is culling the soft ones. Nobody is pulling the heads with brown spots spreading visibly across the outer leaves. Look at the cut end of the stem closely before you buy. If it's dried out, cracked, or darkening, that cabbage has been sitting in an uncontrolled environment for days without a single employee caring enough to remove it. Here's what happens inside those neglected heads. Decomposing cabbage produces elevated nitrite levels that increase the longer the vegetable sits untouched on a warm surface. For anyone with gastroesophageal reflux or peptic ulcers, or families buying bulk produce to save money on weekly meals, those nitrites irritate your stomach lining and can potentially form carcinogenic nitrosamines in your digestive system over time. Cheap cabbage. Expensive consequences your body will pay for. The warehouse model works for canned goods. It does not work for a living vegetable slowly dying on a warm pallet. Check your receipt from last week. If you bought cabbage from any store on this list, what I'm about to reveal is the reason to never go back. Number 1. Dollar Tree and Family Dollar. The most dangerous produce on this entire list comes from the stores charging the absolute least for it. Dollar Tree acquired Family Dollar and pushed aggressively into the grocery space with produce priced at extreme discounts that seem too good to be true. For anyone on a fixed income, the temptation is understandable and very real. Then you look at the FDA record. In 2022, FDA inspections of Family Dollar's distribution center in West Memphis, Arkansas uncovered more than 1,100 live rodents inside the facility. Not a handful, over 1,000. Widespread unsanitary conditions documented across the entire operation from floor to ceiling. The discovery led to a voluntary recall of products across 400 stores in 6 states. The company paid $41.6 million in federal penalties. That is a penalty for conditions so severe the federal government was compelled to intervene with maximum force. Now ask yourself where the cabbage in these stores actually comes from. What distribution centers it passed through? What conditions surrounded it during storage and transit before it reached that shelf? Unknown sourcing, minimal cold chain oversight, a documented history of contamination so severe it generated one of the largest FDA penalties in retail grocery history. For anyone with heart disease or kidney problems who depends on clean produce to manage their conditions or families stretching every dollar at the only affordable store in their neighborhood, the combination of untraceable origin, unverified storage, and proven facility contamination makes Dollar Tree and Family Dollar produce the single highest risk for serious foodborne illness on this list. 1,100 rodents, 41.6 million in fines. They're still selling produce today. The cheapest cabbage in America, the highest price your body will pay. 11 stores exposed. 11 reasons to check where your cabbage comes from. But don't stop eating cabbage entirely. It remains one of the healthiest vegetables you can buy when it comes from the right place. 3 stores prove that fresh, safe, properly handled cabbage still exists in America. HEB has been ranked the #1 grocery retailer in America 4 times in the last 8 years by Dunnhumby's Retailer Preference Index. Not #1 in sheer size, #1 in produce quality, customer savings, and overall shopping experience. HEB is based in Texas and sources a significant portion of its produce from regional farms with short, verifiable supply chains that keep cabbage moving fast from harvest to shelf. The cabbage at HEB didn't cross the country in an unmonitored refrigerated truck for 5 days. It came from a farm close enough to visit and inspect in person. The chain maintains rigorous cold storage protocols throughout and operates its own quality testing labs that go well beyond federal minimums. They don't wait for the FDA to discover a problem. They test for contamination before the produce ever reaches a single customer's hands. Pick up a head of cabbage at HEB and feel the difference immediately. Dense, heavy, tight leaves that snap audibly when you bend them back. That crispness is freshness you can verify with your own hands before you buy. The short farm-to-shelf pipeline means cabbage retains maximum levels of vitamin C, vitamin K, and glucosinolates, compounds shown in peer-reviewed studies to support cardiovascular health and reduce chronic inflammation in aging adults. For anyone watching heart health or families building healthier daily meals together, HEB delivers the actual nutrients cabbage is supposed to provide because they deliver it quickly, before those nutrients have any time to degrade on a neglected shelf somewhere. Publix has been named the top supermarket in America by Newsweek's Best Retailers survey, and the reason becomes obvious the moment you walk into their produce section. Employee-owned, which means the workers stocking those shelves have a direct financial stake in the quality of everything they sell to you. That single fact changes everything about how this store operates from top to bottom. Publix employs dedicated produce clerks who rotate stock multiple times per day without being asked. They pull aging items quickly and without hesitation. They maintain cold case temperatures that consistently meet or exceed FDA guidelines specifically designed for leafy and cruciferous vegetables. Walk through a Publix produce section and look carefully at the cabbage display. The heads are uniform in size, the outer leaves are green and firm, and the entire display is clean, organized, and visibly maintained throughout the day. That is someone's specific job, and they do it well because their own financial future depends on this store's earned reputation in the community. Cut into a Publix head of cabbage and listen closely. Fresh cabbage crunches loudly, the knife meeting real resistance as it passes through tightly packed, fully hydrated leaves. Old cabbage yields quietly, the blades sliding through soft tissue with barely a whisper of sound. For anyone managing cholesterol or blood pressure, or families who serve cabbage weekly as a regular dietary staple, consistently fresh produce delivers reliable levels of soluble fiber and potassium that actively support heart health without the hidden spoilage risks that destroy those same nutrients at less attentive stores. Wegmans consistently ranks among the most trusted grocery brands in America, praised by Consumer Reports for a produce department that sources exclusively from vetted regional suppliers with proven track records. But what truly sets Wegmans apart from every other store on this entire list is one word: traceability. Wegmans produce buyers conduct on-site farm audits in person. They maintain detailed records that allow any single head of cabbage in the store to be traced back to the specific farm, the specific field, and the exact harvest date it came from. If something goes wrong at any point in the supply chain, they know exactly where the problem started and can respond within hours. That is the exact opposite of Dollar Tree's completely unknown sourcing and Dollar General's untraceable supply chain that nobody audits. Pick up a head of cabbage at Wegmans, and you are holding a product with a complete documented history. Where it grew, when it was harvested, how it was stored at every step, and exactly when it arrived at your local store. For anyone on blood thinners who needs predictable vitamin K levels in every single meal, or families who simply want to know where their food actually comes from, Wegmans' consistent sourcing means the nutrient profile of their cabbage stays reliably stable week to week and month to month without any surprises. That predictability isn't a luxury. For anticoagulant management, it is a medical necessity that most stores in America simply cannot provide. Farm audits, full traceability, verified regional sourcing. 3 practices that separate the stores that genuinely care about your health from the stores that gamble with it every single day. What's the worst produce experience you've ever had at a grocery store? Drop it in the comments. Let's see which stores keep showing up. 11 stores exposed, 3 that earn your trust. Subscribe now. And if you're watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.